Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
The sound of the engine turning off fills the garage and Robert lets out a heavy sigh before getting out of the car. The smell of the ocean still clings to his clothes, a silent reminder of the last 28 days spent out at sea. He throws his backpack over his shoulder, his muscles aching from the hard work on the rig, and walks to the front door. His heart beats faster even though he's been through this countless times. There's always that mix of anticipation and nervousness. He pushes open the door and is immediately enveloped by a warm, inviting aroma: roasted garlic, melted butter, fresh herbs. The smell makes his stomach rumble, but more than that, it brings a sense of normalcy, a reminder that he's back home to what should be his safe haven. From the hallway he can see the kitchen. Sarah has her back to him, stirring something in a pot. Her blonde hair is tied up in a messy bun and she moves with practiced precision as she adds seasonings. The scene is familiar. For years he's come home to find Sarah cooking. It's always been a gesture of affection, but this time something's different. It's not the dinner itself or the setting, it's the way everything seems staged, rehearsed, like a play where the actors are trying too hard to look natural. He clears his throat to get her attention and Sarah turns around quickly, her eyes widening for a split second before she gives him a big smile. "You're home earlier than I thought." Her voice carries surprise but also a slight hesitation, something Robert can't pinpoint right away but that unsettles him deep down. "I caught an earlier flight," he says, dropping his backpack on the living room floor and walking toward her. Sarah wipes her hands on her apron and leans in to kiss him. The touch is lukewarm, too quick. In the past there was always a long kiss, a tight hug, a whispered, "I missed you," in his ear. Now it all feels so procedural. "Where are the girls?" he asks, looking around. Sarah turns her attention back to the pot. "Jessica's in her room on the phone, and Amanda. I think she's doing homework." Robert lets out a brief laugh. "So basically on the phone too." Sarah smiles but doesn't say anything else. She just stirs the food, avoiding eye contact. Robert runs his hands over his face, feeling the weight of accumulated fatigue. He misses his daughters. Even with constant video calls, nothing replaces being here. He wonders if they feel his absence the same way he does. He grabs a bottle of water from the fridge and leans against the counter. "How have things been here? Everything okay?" Sarah looks up, hesitates for half a second, then nods. "Yeah, everything's normal." But there's something about the way she says it that makes Robert file that answer away in his mind. Normal, what exactly does normal mean? Dinner's ready a little later and Sarah calls the girls to the table. Jessica comes down first, phone in hand, fingers typing away. She greets him with a quick, "Hey Dad," before sitting down and going right back to her screen. Amanda shows up next, yawning and stretching, giving Robert a lazy smile. "Finally home," she jokes, sitting down and grabbing a piece of bread. Robert smiles at them despite the invisible barrier that seems to hover between them. It's good to see his daughters. He tries to make small talk, asks about school, friends, hobbies, but the answers are short, monosyllabic. He knows part of this is just their age. Teenagers aren't exactly the most talkative people in the world, but he still feels like something has been lost. Something he's not sure is just about his time away, or if it's something else he can't quite see yet. Sarah serves the food and finally sits down. Robert watches his family for a moment before picking up his fork. He wants to enjoy this moment. He wants to feel that even with the distance and all the sacrifices, he still belongs here. But deep down, something's off. It feels like he's a guest in his own home. Robert gets up from the table after dinner and heads to the living room, grabbing a beer from the fridge before collapsing onto the couch. The exhaustion weighs on his shoulders, but what really wears him out isn't the physical labor or the long weeks at sea, it's this silent emptiness hanging over his house, as though he's a stranger in his own family. He spins the bottle in his hands, staring at the label without really focusing on it. For years he held on to the idea that he was doing the right thing, spending an entire month offshore, braving storms, unbearable heat, and 12 to 16-hour shifts so Sarah and the girls could have the best, a spacious house, a new car in the driveway every 2 years, fancy resorts in the summer, expensive clothes and gadgets. He sacrificed himself to give them all the things he never had growing up. But now, sitting here, he wonders if any of that actually meant anything. The offshore life was always cruel, the isolation, seeing the same faces every day, the mechanical routine. But at least there he had a purpose. He knew what needed to be done, where he was supposed to be, what his role was. Here, in his own house, he feels out of place. He looks up when he sees Sarah clearing the dishes. She smiles at him briefly before turning back to the sink, and it's such a rehearsed smile that it almost hurts. When did they stop feeling like husband and wife and start acting like roommates? Robert gets up and walks down the hallway. He stops at Jessica's door, hesitates for a second, and knocks lightly. "Come in." He pushes the door open and finds his daughter sitting on the bed, headphones around her neck, phone in her hand. "Everything okay?" he asks, leaning on the door frame. "Yeah, why?" He lets out a short laugh. "Just wanted to see how you're doing." Jessica nods and forces a smile. "I'm fine, Dad. Just tired." Robert nods, rubbing the back of his neck. "You know you can talk to me, right? About anything." "I know." The silence that follows is uncomfortable. He feels ridiculous, like he's trying to grasp something that slipped through his fingers a long time ago. He leaves the room and closes the door, feeling a tightness in his chest. Jessica used to be the one closest to him, the one who ran to hug him when he got home, the one who cried when he left. Now she only responds with short sentences and forced smiles. He goes back to the living room and sits on the couch, resting his elbows on his knees. Time, that damn time. He thought he could buy back with expensive gifts and fancy trips. He realizes too late that time can't be reclaimed. Moments can't be compensated with money. He wasn't there to see Jessica learn to ride a bike. He missed most of the parent-teacher meetings. He wasn't present for Amanda's first piano recital. And now he's paying the price. Sarah steps into the living room and looks at him for a moment before speaking. "You're acting weird." Robert lets out a long sigh. He searches for the words but nothing seems to capture what he feels, so he just shakes his head. "Nothing." She frowns a little but doesn't push it. She just gives him a weak smile and goes back to the kitchen. Robert rubs his face with both hands, feeling a crushing weight on his chest. He always thought his absence was purely physical. Now he realizes it was deeper than that. He wasn't just an absent father, he was an absent husband. And worst of all, he doesn't know if there's still time to fix it. Robert didn't sleep well that night. He tossed and turned for hours, staring at the dark ceiling, aware of Sarah lying beside him yet feeling a chasm between them. The smell of her perfume, which once brought him comfort, now felt cloying. He tried to ignore that gnawing feeling in his chest, that restlessness that wouldn't let him rest. The next morning he woke before the alarm, still groggy from lack of sleep. Sarah was already out of bed. He heard noises coming from the kitchen and smelled fresh coffee drifting through the house. He got up, ran his hands over his face, and went to the kitchen. Sarah was facing away, stirring the coffee, her phone next to her. The moment she sensed his presence, she picked up the phone quickly and turned around with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Morning, sleepyhead." "Morning," he answered, studying her for a second. She looked the same as always, but now he noticed the small things, the way she avoided eye contact for a bit too long, how she kept her phone screen facing down on the table. Little details he would have missed before. He poured himself some coffee and sat at the table. Jessica and Amanda weren't up yet, so the silence between them stretched on for a few minutes. Sarah was messing around on her phone while he sipped his coffee and watched. Then something happened. Her phone buzzed and for just a moment, she hesitated before picking it up. It was nothing out of the ordinary, but this time Robert was paying attention, and he saw it, the name on the screen, Marcus. His chest tightened. It felt like the air grew heavier. Marcus, a name that stood for friendship, trust, a man he'd known for years who had laughed with him at his own table, in this very house. Sarah quickly swiped the screen to reject the call, like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Robert didn't say anything. He just looked away and finished his coffee in silence. Over the next few days, he started noticing more details. Small things, but now that the seed was planted in his mind, they began to make sense. Sarah dressing up more than usual to run errands. How she'd be on her phone and then immediately lock it when he showed up. It had all been there, right in front of him. He just hadn't seen it. Or maybe he had, but refused to believe it. On Friday, as he went out to mow the lawn, he ran into their neighbor, Mr. Thompson, an almost 70-year-old man who always had something to say about the neighborhood. "Good to see you back, kid," he said, leaning on the fence. "I thought you were still away." Robert frowned. "What do you mean?" The old man shrugged. "I saw your wife coming home late a few times. I figured you still weren't around." Robert's stomach churned. That was enough. That night, he waited for Sarah to fall asleep. He carefully took her phone and left the bedroom. His hands were trembling. He had never invaded her privacy before. He had always trusted her, believed his wife would never betray him. But something inside him was screaming now. He needed to know. He punched in the passcode he assumed she still used, and he got in. What he found on her phone destroyed everything. Messages, hundreds of them, between her and Marcus. Intimate words, jokes, secret meetups, photos, moments he never knew about. Robert felt the world spin around him. What was once just a suspicion was now a brutal truth. Sarah was cheating on him, and not just with anyone, with the man he trusted most. Robert felt his palms sweating as he clutched Sarah's phone. The blue light from the screen lit up his face, revealing shock, pain, and a simmering anger he struggled to contain. Every text, every exchanged laugh between Sarah and Marcus, every hidden meeting, it was all there, plain as day. He wasn't a paranoid man, but now he had proof. Proof that the woman sleeping beside him each night had betrayed him. Proof that his best friend was a scumbag. He could have woken Sarah up right then, could have thrown her phone against the wall, could have screamed and demanded answers. But something stopped him. Instinct, maybe, a voice in his head telling him there was more to uncover. Breathing heavily, he closed her phone and put it back where it was. He returned to bed and lay down beside Sarah, disgusted by every inch that separated them. He never fell asleep. It was 3 o'clock in the morning when he finally made a decision. He needed answers. In the days that followed, Robert started acting differently. He didn't confront Sarah. He gave no indication that he knew. He did the opposite, pretending he was still the clueless husband who'd just come home and wasn't noticing any changes. But really, he was watching her every move. He began to observe his daughters more closely. Amanda and Jessica seemed more distant than ever. He always thought it was just because he was gone so often, but now he couldn't help but suspect something deeper. He remembered something Sarah had written to Marcus in one of the messages: "I don't think he'll ever find out." Find out what? Then a terrible thought took shape. Something he'd never questioned before because he had no reason to. Something that, if true, would be more devastating than any affair. He grabbed his phone and started researching, looking up DNA testing labs, checking turnaround times, prices. His mind was pounding. He felt like he was about to open a door that couldn't be shut again. The next morning, he had breakfast with Jessica and Amanda as if nothing was wrong. He joked around, asked about school, got short answers. But inside, he was fighting a storm of emotions. He waited for the right moment, discreetly collected strands of their hair, then sent them to a lab. Those were the longest days of his life. Every time he looked at his daughters, his chest tightened. He didn't know what would be worse, if they turned out to be his biological kids and he just had to live with Sarah cheating, or if they weren't, meaning his entire life had been built on an even bigger lie. The phone rang. It was the lab. "Mr. Henderson? We have your results." Robert closed his eyes. He gripped his phone. "Go ahead." The pause on the other end lasted only a second, but it felt like an eternity to him. "The paternity test confirmed that Jessica is your biological daughter. However, Amanda is not." His world seemed to stop. Amanda, the little girl he held in his arms the day she was born, the one he rocked to sleep so many nights, the one who'd called him daddy ever since she could talk. She wasn't his daughter. The lab rep kept explaining about test accuracy and the option to retest, but Robert wasn't listening anymore. He stood from the couch as if in a daze. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step feeling like it weighed a ton. He stopped outside Amanda's bedroom door, listening to the soft music playing inside. He lowered his head. He loved her. He loved her like she was his own because, to him, she always had been. But now the truth he'd never imagined possible was lodged in his mind. Sarah hadn't just cheated, she'd lied to him for years. Fury boiled inside him, but he kept it under control. He wouldn't explode, not yet. Because the destruction he was about to cause, it needed to be carefully planned. Robert felt a tightness in his chest, a rage simmering under his skin like a live wire he couldn't contain. The weight of Sarah's betrayal was crushing, but discovering that Amanda wasn't his biological daughter made everything feel even more devastating. He'd spent years dedicating himself to this family, missing precious moments, sweating on that oil rig to give them a good life. And now everything he built, everything he fought for, had been a lie. But Robert wasn't the kind of man who blew up in the heat of the moment. He knew a rash move could cost him any chance at justice. He needed something bigger, something Sarah would never forget. That night, lying next to her in bed, he already had a plan. Over the next few weeks, he pretended he was clueless. He stuck to their usual routines, smiled when needed, hugged his daughters, and acted like nothing was wrong. But behind the scenes, he was preparing the final blow. First, he hired a lawyer who specialized in divorces and marital fraud. He gathered all the messages, all the proof he'd found on Sarah's phone. Then he got paperwork ready to protect his assets. He was determined that when the truth came out, Sarah would walk away with nothing. But that wasn't enough. Robert wanted her to feel the shame, the weight of betrayal. He wanted to expose her just like she'd been humiliating him for years without his knowledge. And the perfect opportunity came with their wedding anniversary. Sarah was excited about it, as though she wanted to strengthen the illusion of a happy marriage. She suggested a special dinner at home, just for the two of them and some close friends. Robert agreed without hesitation. But he had other plans. On the day of the dinner, the house looked perfect, candles on the table, soft background music, guests arriving one by one. Robert wore a calm expression, but inside he was counting the seconds until it all went down. Sarah was glowing, smiling, making rounds with a glass of wine in hand. At one point, she came over to Robert and touched his face. "I love you so much," she said, her eyes bright. Robert's stomach turned. He smiled. "I love you too." That was the last lie he'd ever tell her. When everyone was settled in the living room, chatting and laughing, Robert pulled out his phone and cast it onto the TV screen. His voice was firm when he got everyone's attention. "Everyone, before we start dinner, I want to share something really special." Sarah smiled, unaware of what was coming. Robert took a deep breath and, without breaking eye contact with her, pressed the button to display the messages on the TV. Silence fell immediately. The words on screen were unmistakable, messages from Sarah to Marcus: "Can't wait to see you again, Robert's never going to find out, I think he suspects something, but he's too naive." Sarah's face went pale. The wine glass trembled in her hand before it slipped and fell to the floor. "What?" Her voice was shaky, short of breath. Robert crossed his arms. "I figured tonight was a good time to show everyone what's really going on in our marriage." The room was frozen in shock. Some guests looked at each other, unsure of how to react. Others whispered among themselves. Sarah stammered, looking around like a cornered animal. "Robert, please, don't do this." Her voice barely came out. He just smiled. Then he dropped the final bomb. "By the way, Amanda isn't my daughter." The air was sucked out of the room. Sarah staggered back as if she'd been punched. Jessica's eyes went wide. Marcus, who was among the guests, stood there like a statue. "What?" Jessica's voice shattered the silence. Robert turned to his older daughter, his heart breaking that he had to do this in front of everyone, but he knew he couldn't keep living a lie. "I had a DNA test done. Amanda isn't mine. Your mother lied to me for years." Sarah started sobbing, tears streaming down her face, her voice pleading. "Robert, please, we can talk this out. We can fix this." "There's nothing left to fix, Sarah." He took the divorce papers he'd left on the table and set them in front of her. "I've taken care of everything. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." Sarah collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Marcus, seeing how bad things had gotten, tried to slip away, but Robert pointed at him. "And you, I hope it was worth it." Marcus didn't say a word. He just turned and walked out the door without looking back. The living room was silent as a tomb. Robert looked at Jessica, who was still frozen in shock, then at Amanda, whose eyes brimmed with tears. He felt a deep pain. He didn't want Amanda to suffer. It wasn't her fault. But the truth had to come out. And now he was finally free. Robert left the house that night without looking back. The cold air hit his face, but he didn't really feel anything, not the cold, not relief, not anger. Just a hollow emptiness, as if everything inside him had been ripped out. He'd done it. He'd exposed Sarah, humiliated Marcus, revealed the truth for everyone to see. So why did he still feel that crushing pain in his chest? He got in his car, started the engine, but didn't drive. He just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, listening to Sarah's muffled sobs from inside the house. He didn't pity her, she deserved it. She'd ruined their marriage, lied to him, made a fool of him for years. But what about Amanda? Amanda, her name weighed on his mind like an anchor sinking into the ocean. She wasn't his biological daughter. That was a fact. But what about all the love he felt for her? All the care? Every night he'd rocked her to sleep as a baby, every time he held her hand to cross the street, every birthday hug, was it all a lie? Robert closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. He needed time. He needed to get away and think. But he knew one thing for sure, from this moment on, his life would never be the same. Over the next few days, everything unfolded as planned. His lawyer filed for divorce, and he made sure Sarah couldn't lay claim to his fortune. He didn't want financial revenge, he wanted justice. And he got it. Sarah begged him to talk. She sent messages, left voicemails, tried to make him reconsider. But there was nothing left to say. The only conversation that really mattered now was with Jessica and Amanda. After the initial shock wore off, Jessica decided she didn't want to live with Sarah. She packed her bags and moved in with Robert without hesitation. She said she couldn't look at her mother the same way after all that. She said she felt betrayed. But Amanda didn't know what to do. She was only 14 and saw her world collapse overnight. One day she believed she had a father who loved her, the next, she learned he didn't share her blood. Robert wanted to hate her. He wanted to walk away and never look back. But every time he tried, he remembered the first day he'd held her at the hospital. He remembered her toothless baby smile, the nights she climbed into his bed after a nightmare, the letters she'd write to him when he was offshore saying how much she missed him. Blood meant nothing in the face of all that. He needed a few weeks to process everything, but one day he finally made a choice. He went to Sarah's house and knocked on the door. She answered with swollen, tear-streaked eyes, but Robert wasn't there for her. "Where's Amanda?" Sarah's voice shook as she called the girl. Amanda stepped into the hallway, nervous, phone in her hands. When she saw Robert, tears welled in her eyes. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice trembling. Robert's heart clenched. He shook his head and took a step toward her. "Never." Amanda tried to hold back her tears but failed. She ran to him and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "I don't want to lose you." Robert closed his eyes and pulled her closer. "You'll never lose me." And right then, he knew that despite everything, there was still something in his life worth saving. The truth had hurt. It had destroyed everything he once knew. But it also brought him something he'd never realized before, the certainty that a family isn't defined just by blood. It's defined by love. And that love, he would never stop feeling. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.